Okay. And I wanted to introduce our discussion result about the questions collected in the last meeting, and maybe Wu Jian and Xu Ran will help me to introduce the discussion results. Okay.
Okay. So you're first.
Hi, Gujian.
Yeah. Hey, I'm here.
Could we start from the first question?
Oh, okay. Should I show my script or you can see the document?
I think we can all see the document.
Okay. Wait a moment. The document in TC or the document in the last meeting?
The TC document, which links out to the one from the last meeting.
Okay. So we answer the question about the TC meeting. Okay, the first question is OSLO DB team leader. Who do you want? Who do you actually want? Our answer is according the teamwork. Concern is if the teamwork will be impacted by OceanBase integration, but based on our test result, there is no impatient. So maybe no request for this team. The same with Nova and Keystone. We have test by Hongxing. So Hongxing can introduce some of our test process.
Oh, okay. I did a demo in the summit in Swan. So I just launched the OceanBase and OpenStack. They are successfully deployed on Kubernetes. And I used the OpenStack Helm project to do that. And I also tested that I kill a pod of the OceanBase cluster, and it can recover automatically, and OpenStack runs smoothly. So that's the test for now, and maybe we can do a further test if you are interested, and we can add more tests for the OpenStack project, maybe. So to launch a environment with OceanBase as the database, and to test the compatibility, maybe.
Yes, and we have a demo show in Seoul. In the demo can be recorded in YouTube, and I found that Kendall has put the link in the chat list. And the next question is, do we need any code change in our project or libs? So I think I think we don't need to change the code in OpenStack, as OceanBase is compatible with MySQL. Yeah, our demo and our test is no change. It is we don't change. Hey.
Okay. Oh, maybe I can say that. So in our demo, we just configured the OpenStack Helm project, and we add several configs to make the components using the OceanBase database, and we just add the database address and username and password, just some common configs, and we don't need to modify the code. So we just add the configs is enough.
Yeah, the demo is okay.
Yeah, so I think I left some questions in both Etherpad and caused some confusions. But yeah, I think my understanding from the previous session about OceanBase is that we don't really need any code change because OceanBase provides API purely compatible with the MySQL, which means that we can use the current implementation we have in SQL Alchemy or PyMySQL or OsloDB just connect to use the OceanBase as a database backend with the appropriate database connection URL configuration without any code change. So I think that at this point we don't really need any kind of the code development. But I think the question is more about the testing plan and the the integration plan in the deployment tooling. So I think that is the overall the consensus agreed feeling during the session I had during in the previous OceanBeam session. So yeah. I think for further integration, I mean, we probably need to start testing it somehow. But I think there are two options we have here. The first one is to integrate it into DevStack somehow to add to start running some CA jobs using the OceanBase as a database backend instead of MySQL. I think that is one option we have. And the other will be just going into some actual production deployment toolings like OpenStack Helm or Cola or OpenStack Ansible and start implementing some kind of integration there and do some testing with the actual tooling. So I think these are the two options I found during the previous discussion. And mostly the next question is who can help that kind of discussion, I expect.
Sorry, if I may, because I'm not sure if I understand exactly. So what actually is expected from the OpenStack community and projects like Neutron, for example, which I represent? Do you want us to have CI jobs in our regular queue using this database instead of MySQL, or do you want to have some third-party CI in Neutron to test on your own this solution? Because I'm not sure if I understand correctly. What is really the request here?
Yeah, so I think that is probably the question to the OceanBeam folks. But my current understanding is that you can deploy somehow OceanBeam within the single VM as long, once you can implement some kind of a DevStack plugin. So one possible, the potential thing we can do is to add such kind of, once we first need someone to implement that, the DevStack plugin to deploy OceanBeam first. But once that is implemented, then we can start adding some testing in the core project, like Neutron or probably Keystone, Nova, Cinder. I mean, not all, but we can start with a few core projects to have some DevStack tests with the OceanBeam database, OceanBeam as a database backend. I think that is the one option we may have. If it will be quite difficult to have OceanBeam deployed in a single small VM, then yeah, as Warwick said, we might need to have some external CI with enough capacity. So the first question might be whether Ocean Beam can be deployed in a single node with relatively small virtual machine.
So yeah, my question was mostly to the OceanBase team, but I wanted to clarify. Even if we can deploy it in small VM or something and have DevStack integration, if we will have CI jobs in projects like Neutron CI or CheckQ or Gate or Nova or others, it will mean that those teams will be responsible for this integration. And I don't think that, for example, we have anyone in Neutron team who can take responsibility for such kind of job. So this may be hard for me, and that's why I want to clarify what's the goal of this. Having third-party CI so that OceanBase team can kind of make sure that their solution can work with OpenStack, or do we want to have OceanBase as a fully supported by OpenStack team community database, like MySQL?
Yeah, the first question is OceanBase can deploy it in a single node. The answer is yes, and we can deploy in a single node with 4 CPU and 8 gigabyte memory. Who's the responsibility to drive the integration in DB-Stack? I think OceanBase team will do this, but we may need some help.
Sorry, may I ask a question? So how to test the MySQL for now? And I think we can make the final goal to test the OceanBase as you test the MySQL. But for currently, we can add some tests ourselves, or you can just run a simple test or something.
Sorry, you might have to repeat that question. You said, how would you test MySQL right now? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, how to test the MySQL as your
Yes.
database for now?
Yes. So we install it a single node inside a DevStack, and I can just link you to parts where that is done. So it's pretty straightforward, which is kind of where I think that, if the installation of OceanBase is straightforward as well, it could be as simple as that, what we currently have.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much the same. So we can install OceanBase on maybe 2 CPU and 8 gigabytes the results. And you can use RPM package or using Docker.
Yeah, that's the part I think what Takashi was mentioning, which was in case this can be customized and you have a lot of options to throw in, etc. You might need a DevStack plugin that makes integration a whole lot easier um, with DevStack. But I don't know if a DevStack plugin is necessary if you want to make this a standard part of DevStack as well. That might be okay. You might have to discuss with the OpenStack QA team.
Okay. Maybe we can implement a DB-Stack plugin, but what we mainly focus is whether the project may test OceanBase. So it's mainly focused on the compatibility test.
So in terms of compatibility, most of the OpenStack projects use the database through two levels of indirection. One is AlzoDB and the other one is SQL Alchemy. I think from a project perspective, we would be concerned if we had to modify the code to specifically handle edge cases with OceanBase. There may be some level of modifications that require. We do have to do some things between MySQL and Postgres and SQLite, but in general, we try to have as little knowledge of the backend system, provided it is supported by SQL Alchemy. So what level of compatibility testing were you thinking of doing? Because from just a CI point of view, I don't know if we'd want to put a OceanBase job into every single project to show that it's compatible. That's a lot of CI time. It might be applicable in some cases, or to do it in a periodic fashion. But we had a discussion about whether or not we should be testing Postgres, for example, with the Neutron folks earlier, and we kind of only spot check it. So like in our functional tests, we have an opportunistic test plugin that says, if this is available on the system, also run the exact same set of tests with that in our functional jobs, but we don't have an integration job that tests anything other than MySQL.
Okay. So, Gujian, what do you think?
I think we can follow the MariaDB CI project.
Well, the point I was trying to make is we don't actually have a MariaDB CI project or Postgres DB CI project in OpenStack. We have CI jobs for each of the individual parts of OpenStack. They may or may not use MariaDB or Postgres, depending on how DevStack is configured in those jobs. But by default, we test almost everything with MariaDB. In theory, the projects shouldn't care whether it's Postgres or not. Yes, there can be differences, but that's what SQL Alchemy is meant to provide, is the abstraction over the database engines. We know that they're not 100% compatible, but each individual OpenStack project like Nova or Neutron or Horizon doesn't tend to test every possible database combination, because from our level of abstraction, that shouldn't impact how the code of that project functions. So you could, for example, have a DevStack plugin, and that DevStack plugin could be enabling it and then running normal Tempest to assert that everything's working. But I'm not sure that we should be adding a voting job to every project that runs in that configuration. Or if we were, we'd want to have people interested in OceanBase helping to maintain that.
Yeah, we can have the same way like Postgres we used to have, like a periodic job and in experimental on project side, but the stack tempest side we can have it running in a check pipeline so that we do check there.
If it is acceptable by the QA team, my current feeling is that it might be easy to start with probably started with the DevStack repo, I guess. I mean, somewhere in the QA repo as a single place, and we start creating some CI job to run the most minimum scenario. And once we get it past, I mean, once that scenario passes in the dev QA repository, then we can, as a next step, start discussing it to the other repository. But yeah, at this stage, I think there are several concerns about adding the directory to the project repos, given the fact that we are not sure how it is going. So I guess the QA repos like DivStack repo or probably
Yeah,
Tempest as an alternative
yeah,
would be a good starting point. But I just want to ask some opinion about that, Jim, especially.
yeah. Can you hear me? I just
Yes,
opened.
yes.
Yeah,
Mm,
okay, so
yes.
yeah, I think Takashi is right. In Tempest, maybe we can add. DevStack is more of like testing platform kind of thing and installation, but in Tempest we can have that and running a set of tests or maybe the complete set later on. And once we see the job is stable and all, then obviously project can adopt that to add as a periodic somewhere. But yeah, we can try it in Tempest. There's no issue.
So you are suggesting we follow PostgreSQL to the test, uh, uh, not in CI, but in some job run one day, one times, or one week.
No, not entirely. I think what the suggestion is first figure out a way to install OceanBase with DevStack, and start integrating it with DevStack and land a test job. Where that goes can be a discussion later. I suppose you're hearing suggestions that this should not be a voting job against each OpenStack repository or each OpenStack service repository. So that still seems like a discussion that you can have later. As first steps, it feels like having a DevStack integration seems like the place to start. Um, and you're hearing suggestions about what next, from
Yeah,
what I
just to
understand.
clarify as well, from another point of view, if this was working and was stable, we probably wouldn't want to put in a dedicated ocean-based job, but we already have like 5 or 6 different jobs. We could probably change one of them to use ocean-based as a database,
Yeah.
because in theory, it shouldn't impact the stability of the job, right? So if it's shown to be stable and functional, and there is a plugin for that, then integrating it into the existing jobs we have is something we can consider at that point. And initially, we just need to get to that starting point of actually having a way to deploy it reliably, and run Tempest against it or whatever. So I don't know if this was answered, but I thought there was a question about what distributions currently package OceanBase. Was that answered in the Etherpad, or? Because we had discussions a long time ago around, say, OVS DPK. When that wasn't in distribution repos, I used to maintain a plugin to compile it from source, but we had a lot of pushback from the community that we didn't want to have to download something compiled from source as part of every job. So is this available as a Debian package to install on Ubuntu 24.4 Noble, or on CentOS 9 stream, or on any of the testing runtime operating systems we currently have?
And this might be new to the OceanBase folks. So I'm just going to drop a link here to the Linux distros that we test with. Um, and so, I mean, I would think you would want to review that. But I do see an answer on line 463, Sean, that they prefer to use a standalone Docker image.
I mean, that's technically doable, though we don't require Docker or Perlman in DevStack today. We may have the ability to pull it in some of the other cases like Prometheus, that kind of thing. But the standard model of DevStack is we install it as a system-wide package rather than running it in a container. Not necessarily concerned about that, because we have Ansible roles as well in CI for providing those packages, and they are available on multiple distros. So if someone wanted to test with this locally, it should be fairly reproducible.
I mean,
Okay.
that's one way we're doing. I mean, that's the only way we're doing DevStack with Ceph. Ceph is today only in
Oh, that's true.
containers.
Yeah, Ceph ADM is now using Pullman as a had dependency. So that's probably fine.
But I think, if I understood correctly, hardware requirements of this OceanBase database, it seems like it requires 8 gig of memory for itself. So we will have to modify, even if we will use this database instead of MySQL in one of the jobs in Neutron or Nova, we will need to add additional node to this job, just to this database. Is my understanding correct? Or because currently we can have single node DevStack, and most jobs are like that, right? With these requirements, we will need multi-node job, and one node will be only for the database, right? Which is significant increase of the infra resources, right?
So when using MySQL, we're using somewhere in the order of 300 to 500 megs, I think, for the database. So in our single node jobs, we have 8 gigs total for everything, including the VMs we're spawning within that job. And like the entire usage of OpenStack is usually of the order of like 2 gigabytes, including the database, including memory queue, etc. Maybe a little bit higher, but if it really did require 8 gigs, it would require a dedicated node at that point.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if that 8 gigabyte is a quite high limit. I mean, does OceanBase fail to start if the node has less than 8 gigabyte, or are you? Is 8 gigabyte is a kind of recommended minimum for actual deployment? Is that hardware limit or soft limit? May I ask some opinion from the OceanBase folks?
8 gigabytes, maybe the minimum requirement to launch a tenant to.
So it does not
uh,
start if the node has less than 8 gigabyte, right?
right.
I mean, if I understand that there will be a minimum for the production services, but we can sometimes have a less, resources just for CI testing I mean, the CI testing. So we probably just can start with implementing that in DevStack and find out the actual requirement we need in the CI run eventually. If there's no actual hard checking of that 8 gigabyte requirement in the OceanBase side. I mean, if the OceanBase does not really start, I mean, reject to start with the smaller amount memory, then there will be no other options than adding more and more resources for that specific CI. But if you're talking more about recommended minimum, then I think we can start checking the actual requirement we will see in the CI job run.
Even if it is doing a check that the host is 8 gigabytes, that's actually what we do have. So as long as it's not actually trying to allocate that, and it's using a reasonable amount of RAM under CI loads, so like not that heavily used, it might be viable.
Yeah, I think the 8 gigabyte or is the usual memory size for DevSec VM, but someone can correct me if I'm saying something wrong.
That's correct.
When started, OceanBase will use about 2 gigabyte memory. Yeah, but in our deployment tool, we will check the machine the machine have 8 gigabyte memory.
Okay,
If not, we will fail to start.
Do we need to use a deployment tool? So you said that I'm looking at the repo right now, and there is a packaging directory with Debian files, and there's an RPM directory, and I'm also seeing the images directory. So, oh, actually, that's just SVGs. My question basically is, can we just take a container of this with Parman and deploy it directly with a single command, or with Docker and a single command, or do we have to use a specific tool to install and configure this?
Yeah, you can install OceanBase with YUM install. It's an tool in CentOS. We have Debian package, but it is not in Debian's package source.
Yeah, so it looks like there's an example of doing stat with Docker, which just uses Docker run to effectively run it. So I think we can probably ignore what the other installer is using and then just run the container and see if it functions. And then we can kind of go from there. So the other way of doing this, obviously, is third-party CI, but I'm assuming that that's too high a lift for the OceanBase community to actually do the testing themselves and report back to the community, which is why we're having this discussion in the first place, right? Is to figure out how both communities can work together.
I think it's a two-part discussion. One is, I mean, I think we've been asking for an integration test, and that came up as a question from the previous discussion as well. But I think previously on this Etherpad, there were questions about integrating with the deployment tools, with Kola, with OpenStack Helm, OpenStack Ansible, and so on.
Yeah. So that would be a separate kind of
Yeah.
discussion for each of those tools to decide if it's in their scope or not to support.
Yeah. All right. We're at the end of the time that we had allocated for this. So I just want to check if there are any more concerns that we have not spoken about today.
So for the integrating, I can see Mikhail and Vladimir are here. So do you have any opinions about the integration?
I think separately from the TC discussion, you're going to have to convince each of the project teams that it's worth investing their review bandwidth and time in doing the integration as well. I don't think we're necessarily going to just say no, but someone from OceanBase needs to be actually standing up to do the work to do this, because I don't think the individual teams have the capacity to do that. One thing to keep in mind as well, most of OpenStack requires that whatever replication or synchronization mechanism you're doing, you maintain ACID rules, as in if we write something and the transaction is written, if we do a read from any other client, we should see that. Galera breaks this, which is why we don't support active-active Galera in OpenStack. So I know that OceanBase is meant to be a horizontally scalable cloud-native database, but it still needs to have those atomic reads writes and make sure it's always consistent on the reads. Otherwise, it will break some of the fundamental assumptions that we have with AlsoDB and how the database that it is providing to us actually functions. So those are the things to keep an eye out for when you start to try and do the integrations, to make sure you don't have regressions like that. If it breaks that contract, things will break in all of the services, and they are not service-side. It would mean that the database doesn't meet the minimum requirements for running it with that service.
I guess I have a question, like, has anyone actually tried any of this yet? I mean, we're talking about like integrating into CI, but like, do like several Tempest runs pass against services, like the main services running against us, or are we like not even to that point yet?
I just tried to deploy OceanBase and OpenStack using OpenStack Helm, but not using other tools or running the further tests. But using the OpenStack Helm seemed okay to launch OpenStack and OceanBase.
Yeah, but I guess answering your question, Dan, I don't think we've gotten to integration testing yet. So
To even know if it works, I mean.
oh, well, that part I think there is a link to the demo on line 447. I haven't looked at it yet, but um, that's the one that we were just discussing.
Okay.
One other question as well. I'm just searching. It looks like the OceanBase SQL Alchemy plugin is out of trees. It's not upstream in SQL Alchemy, but I'm not seeing a license file on that either. So is that Apache 2 license? Is it compatible with the Apache 2 license? Or is there a different repo that I didn't quickly find with Google that does the integration with SQL Alchemy?
Oh, you filed a project is SQL Alchemy for OceanBase. You talk about it.
Yes, so that's how we integrate. SQL Alchemy as a database integration layer. So if it doesn't support OceanBase, we can't support it at the project level. So there appears to be a plugin for that. I found that there's also a different OceanBase Pi package, but I'm assuming that's a native one, not for SQL Alchemy. So is there a plugin, an officially supported plugin for SQL Alchemy, and is that licensed under terms are compatible with Apache 2 so that we can use this within OpenStack?
Yes. I think this project is not an official project. uh, I I have never seen this project before.
Yeah, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what's tested is just using the existing MySQL client implementation. I mean, they are not using any ocean-based plugin in MySQL, the SQL Alchemy, but they are just using the MySQL plugin in SQL Alchemy, which internally uses PyMySQL, I think. And what they are replacing is just database backend, so the client library may not be different from the one used in the one used in the usual MySQL deployment. So I think we don't really have about that concern about Python library.
Well, that kind of implies that we shouldn't need to have to test it then, in that if it's actually transparently usable with the normal MySQL client, it should have the same semantics as MySQL. So while it could be tested in, say, Cola or any of the deployment tools that are saying they support this, you wouldn't need to test it in Nova, Neutron, or Keystone because it should just be MySQL from our point of view.
I think the question is mostly about the confidence of that API compatibility, but yeah, I'm not too sure about it.
Well, that's kind of why I think Sean was asking about ACID compliance and why I was asking about, does this actually work enough to do more than just like create a Ceros instance, like under load? Because it seems like there's a lot of that could go wrong based on what I'm hearing. Like not using a native client. It's cool for compatibility, but maybe isn't as straightforward as that. So it seems very, very early to be talking about anything other than like a CI job. I mean, a periodic job in CI that maybe runs a full stack against this, but like that kind of a job I would assume could be a little bit more flexible in terms of being multi-node and having one 8 gig worker that does nothing other than run the database and something else that does but like that could happen very, very peripherally to everyone else, until it's proven out.
Awesome. So maybe we will start with DV stack open to make the test case pass.
Yeah, that's a good starting point, and I'm taking these action items on line 494. So from what we've heard, it feels like that's a good first step. Try to integrate with DevStack, and once that is complete, we can talk about the integration testing, and then we'll figure out if we need to run this in against the project and what cadence, etc. And parallelly, you can discuss with the deployment tooling folks and the deployment tooling projects because they don't use DevStack. They're going to do they're going to have their own code bases to do this deployment. So that code will look a lot different. Does it sound like a plan? All right. Thank you so much for bringing this discussion here. I think we should wrap it up and move to the next topic here. I mean, you can find us at any time in the OpenStack-tc channel or the OpenStack Discuss email list, and I can share some of the resources after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And let's move on to the next topic, which is the tenant policy on the CI.
So I don't think Jeremy is able to attend at this time, but I guess I can do my best here. So there's a number of things that are like encoded as policy through Zool configuration in the OpenStack tenant for Zool. And I believe this topic is specifically discussing what we refer to as clean check, which is the idea that before any change can go into the gate, it must have a +1 from Zool first, which is you get by having check pass tests. And the reason for that was, forever ago, we were chasing down gate resetting bug issues. And what we found was that in multiple instances over a short period of time, changes had failed in check, passed once, got approved, and then failed in the gate, and then managed to merge, on after multiple attempts via people doing recheck after recheck after recheck. And so what we realized was, these are they're flaky issues that are showing up in CI, but it passes just often enough that if you're persistent, you can get it into the gate, you can get it to pass and then merge. But now that flaky issue is merged into the code base, and every job that runs is going to be affected by it. And so to mitigate against that, clean check was implemented, where basically you had to pass 2 times in a row. You had to pass check, and then you had to pass gate to merge, rather than just passing in the gate if you got an approval. And part of the issue there was people were not debugging why things were failing. They were just rechecking. So even though if you spent, 2 minutes looking at why this failed, and it would be clear to someone that, it's failing in the test for the thing that I implemented. Clearly there's something wrong here. People were just ignoring that. They were rechecking and rechecking. So I think there's a couple things at play here. One is it's in general, if code can work often enough that it will pass eventually, there's the risk that it will land, and then you have flaky code in there. Another is that people are not able, willing, understanding, whatever, to do in-depth debugging of every failure, and so it's easier for those flaky things, even if they're related to your code, to get through. So anyway, long story short, the reason to have this rule is to mitigate against those problems. And I think the question now is whether or not things have changed sufficiently that we don't need to mitigate against them anymore and can remove the clean check requirement and just let things go into the gate if they're approved. And I'll hand it over to, I think Sean was first.
If we were to do that, I would like us to go back to how we had it with recheck and re-verify and restrict it so that only the core team is allowed to do re-verify and have it rerun the gate thing. Because I do believe that the green check is very important to keep. So if we're relaxing it, I wouldn't want it to be so that anyone could have it re-trigger just the gate jobs. If you want to re-trigger them as a normal person and you're not part of the core team, then you just do a full recheck and it goes through both. Because then at least we know that the core team can review that and make the determination of, does this look like it's an info test related to the thing that's actually going true, or is it potentially related to the code that we're reviewing and approving?
Sorry, Sean, you're saying give the core people re-verify access? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And what re-verify would mean is what I used to mean like before we had ZooV3, which is rerun only gate, but you still had to pass check once for that to work.
Could we put people in could we have a separate global group of like trusted to re-verify so that we could like not just give it to all core members, but like people that like have demonstrated the ability? I mean, I'm kind of being a little bit facetious, but like
we had the release teams for things like that before that, so we could have that other group. But yeah,
I'm not sure how we would express that in the Zool config. I feel like it's possible to do something along those lines, but I'm not sure how flexible it is to do like what Dan is describing. Because I think you may be able to say, well,
you can do it by email, but on the pipeline triggers, we don't have access to the Garrett group, so we can't say from this group.
Yeah, well, so yeah, you can take action based on the information that's in the Garrett event. And you're right, the Garrett event doesn't say this person is from all of these groups, but it does say this person did the comment. So I worry that to implement that in the current Zool world, you'd have to explicitly list a bunch of humans. And then
but wait a minute. Is that different for what I described versus what Sean described?
No, it's broken in both cases because we don't have the way of doing that grouping.
That's what I was going
natively.
Right. So whether you're in that global group or the core group doesn't matter. It's still hard to.
Right.
Okay.
What you could do instead, well, so the way I would suggest accomplishing that is through the votes, right? That might require adding another label or something like that.
Could you do it that if the person voted +2, then they can do re-verify? That must mean they're a core.
Yeah, you might be. Yeah, so if the event had a +2 in it and a re-verify in it, you could have a rule matching on that, I believe, because all of that information would be present in the Garrett event.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm only being like slightly facetious about the like a global group, just because I think that there are certainly people that would have core on some projects that might be just willing to grind them through, and I have a personal vendetta against people that recheck grind without checking each one, but
that split access I was saying in the chat, it's something like what Ironic has. So Ironic has a group that can +2 patches but can't workflow them.
We have that as well for the SDK. So most of the core team members are able to +2 but don't have +W. So there's a few ways to do that, but that would require a new label again.
But that's not what I'm describing, unless we create a new label on everything that only that group can do. Right. So
let's pass the thing on to Ghanshyam.
Yeah, there's one thing like what Clark mentioned about those, recheck thing happen and things got merged. Other than that, the point is our gate pipeline is not same as the check pipeline. We do test a lot of different configuration and different jobs in the check pipelines, which we don't test in the gate pipelines. And some of them are non-voting, but still we do verify if they are breaking there or not. So bypassing the check pipeline is again another dangerous thing that we might be missing, or those testing has been covered or not, even though gate is passed. So that is another thing.
That's true, but it also works the other way, right? that you might be less likely to pass the check for legitimately unrelated to the patch reasons, even though Gate, is technically checking the things that we really care about for that patch, right? Like if we don't run any of the CentOS jobs in Gate, they're less likely to fail due to stupid yum issues in the Gate. But if you have to keep passing check, which does run the CentOS jobs, which are failing for dumb yum reasons, then you're kind of penalizing as a result of that. I mean,
yeah, but thing is like more of like whether we are testing and covering everything and versus this, taking care of this non-failure or something. What I'm saying is like not just those forcing recheck again and again. What Clark mentioned can introduce some another known bug, like the difference between the testing between check and Gate pipeline can also do that. Second,
I'm
about
wondering
this
sorry to interrupt, but that isn't there an expectation that every job that's there in Gate is a subset of the check pipeline, or is that
it
not?
used to be, but there are non-voting doesn't need to be in Gate pipeline. That is one thing. And also many places like we only test like in a check pipeline only. One example I have that is stable jobs we test on the Tempest master. We just test in the check, not in the Gate, because testing all the stables on every change on check and Gate is the kind of a overhead.
but we can do that because of clean check. If we remove clean check, then we technically should have to move more things that are only in check into Gate to make sure that we don't lose that coverage, right? So it moves a little, it makes the Gate pipeline necessarily have to be a little bit fatter, I think.
Yeah, again, then it will increase the time which from current one, which has Gate less, right? So that's the one thing. Other thing I want to mention, like giving this subset of group or set of people for re-verify. I'm not sure how that will solve the problem, because in current scenario also, even though it's a core team or non-core, very few people debug and check the testings. If with this re-verify we are giving it to a set of people or all the core members, again we will be ending up things like we expect every core member to debug test thing, which is not happening today. So re-verify will go in the same way the recheck does.
That's why to me handing re-verify to core is not really a suitable solution. I want to see your score of having of your recheck reason before I put you in that group, if I was supreme ruler.
Yeah, that's true.
But the concern there could be that this group is not is small enough that, I mean, the number of
Oh
projects
yeah,
is large.
I by far do not think that this is a silver bullet. I mean, it would be a minor optimization in certain cases that, if it's applied too widely, will purely make the problem worse, for sure.
Yeah, there is a chance like re-verify will be again another blind recheck, and we have to put more guidelines for re-verify.
I still think that every time you do a good recheck with a reason, you should get a token in your bank account, and then you can use those tokens for re-verifies, something like that.
So I'm aware that Savik has a hand up for a while. One other thing though as well, we don't necessarily have to have the same policy for every single project. We could have alternate pipelines that have the one allows re-verify and others don't. So if Nova says hell no and Newton says yes, then that could be an option for those communities to agree on. Just want to leave that comment, but Savik, do you want to?
Yep.
So thanks. I'm not exactly sure what is the goal for this and for potentially for this change, but I can imagine that it's to have less load on the infra and less jobs running with rechecks and so on. Maybe, I don't know if it's doable, but maybe do something like yellow cards. So Gate failed, you have yellow card and you can just recheck Gate, but if it failed second time, it's red card and it's going to check like it is currently. So we would have slightly less strict policy, but still preventing flaky changes. I don't know if it's even doable, but just
Yeah,
maybe.
actually,
Go ahead.
Well, I was just say so I think the goal is to speed things up, is a throughput thing, right? Necessarily, if you're requiring things to jump through more hoops, then throughput is lowered. And think, for example, when there's a lot of CVE changes, and maybe we trust the people who have written those CVs to have done local testing, and there's lots of review. When they go into Garrett, you just want to approve them, and